I'm Holly Joseph. I am the Vice Chair of the Environmental Planning Committee in Atherton. So welcome, I'm so happy to see you here. And we have a really exciting speaker today. This is Laurel Nagel, and she's a master gardener with over 20 years of experience. She's also the owner of Every Blooming Thing. She's going to come and talk to us from everything from container gardening for residences and businesses, and she finished her landscape architecture program at UC Berkeley Extension.
Yeah.
And has been designing gardens, consulting, and lecturing about sustainable gardening, which is perfect for today on Earth Day. She also taught drought-tolerant gardening and garden design for homeowners throughout the Bay Area, and also through Linkso and at the San Francisco Flower and Garden Show. And her particular interest is anything that blooms. But today, it's all about sustainable gardening. So we're really looking forward to seeing her. And welcome, Laura.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for coming in today on such a nice day. Do I just click it? How does this?
Yeah, so you'll be scrolling it down actually.
Which was it?
Since it's a PDF, you can just
Oh, there we go. There we go.
just the up and down keys.
Okay, great. So, anyway, welcome. I do have a container gardening business, but as she said, I have done a lot of gardening for a long time, and sustainable gardening is a big interest to me. But I'm guessing that if you've heard some conversations or lectures over the last few years, they've probably mostly been about water. But I've got a slight twist on that, which is, I think, to be really water-wise, you have to consider all the resources in the garden, and since it's Earth Day, this is a good day to do it. Also, just a word about Master Gardeners. We are trained to go out in the community and teach people good techniques for gardening. We use science-based information, so I won't tell you on the waxing moon or the waning moon or whatever when to do stuff, although there may be some scientific reason for that. But usually it's information that's come through UC Davis, through their ag department is what we're located with. And I know there's a table outside, and it's a great connection. You said this will be on the website, so I want to encourage people, if they have questions or have a problem, to contact the Master Gardener office. So these are all the different things that I think sustainable gardening basically affects. And to me, this is not sustainable gardening. This is water-wise or water-less gardening, but I wouldn't consider this sustainable gardening. And this is an interesting book if you're interested in just the effects of how to improve capturing the water and the whole cycle of what that will be. But what it shows is actually the more paving we do or letting everything go fallow, the water just runs off. It gets collected in our storm drains. It often goes out to the bay. So we're actually shorting, the more building there is, the less groundwater there is, sort of the less moisture in the air. There's really a harsh cycle there. The more we just sort of quit gardening because we're trying to save water, we end up losing it. So the most important thing to do, I think, is to actually start with the ground. And of course we have clay, and this is how you know you have clay. If you can make you wet it, and you can make a little ribbon. I mean, my kids, used to make bricks and see if they would harden in the sun. So that's really what we're stuck with. And on its own, especially in these areas where it's been developed and trampled, as opposed to, say, the hills where the oak leaves have been allowed to fall and decompose, we get this, and the water just runs off. Now, clay is great in that it absorbs water. It will hold it, but clay will hold the water tighter than a root can pull it off. So you may even have slightly damp clay, and your roots can't pull it off. It's ion thing. So the best thing to do, and, oh, this is also important, people talk about how limited our water is, but if you have kids who were in elementary school, maybe even this week, they do this little apple thing where they take an apple, and that is the earth. They cut it into fourths. 3/4 are water. I don't know, of those thirds or what's remaining, those quarters, it's divided again, and you end up with 1/32 that's really sustainable or available not only for food crops but in general. And then that part's really the soil, if that's the core of the earth, if we've just taken it out. So when you really think about soil, we have less soil than we do water. And I think we really need to pay attention to what we have. In a healthy soil, there's this whole universe of things we never see, we don't understand, but it really affects how the plants grow, the nutrition that we might get from them, how disease and pests might travel through there. And at Lingso, they sometimes do a really great talk, and they have a series of classes on different topics. But if you ever have a chance to do the soil food web or one of their talks, it's really fascinating. Our clay that I showed you up there doesn't have all of this going on at the moment. Again, because we've had years of development and cars and people and the top scraped off. So the way to get that, or why you want to, this is also a profile. This is a clay, this is California, but in a healthy one, you don't start with the clay. You've got a couple of inches of really almost organic matter, and then what we would call really healthy soil, and then you get the changes as you go down. And the reason you want that is because there's a whole symbiotic relationship between roots and that whole life that's going on. Not only is it decomposing all the organic matter, and yes, that releases nutrition, but there are fungi that connect to the root. So if this is a root, then there are these little fungi that actually are like mini roots, and they pull more water, more nutrition. So this is just grass, but then the grass that's got those fungi in it. And there are a lot of inoculants or things that they'll sell you to put in your ground to encourage more of this mycorrhizal fungi, but you just need to add organic matter. You don't need to buy a product, you don't need to, dump it in. It's there naturally. It will come if it's got the food. Anyway, it really can help the plants. It can help them in drought years. It can help them with any kind of stress we might have, and you're going to have a much better result. This is also just shows when you've got soil that isn't, baked into bricks, you can have a bigger root ball. That's really just what that's showing you. And really the best way to do it is to add organic matter. It's as simple as that. I went to Lingso because they've made a big investment, and I don't have any relationship with Lingso other than that I shop there. But they've got a lot of great products, but you can find them elsewhere. Everything from what I call a finished compost. So this is organic matter all the way down to it doesn't really break down anymore. This is the kind of thing that's actually good for getting the clay to form little clumps. So you get little bits of air and little bits of room for water, etc. To something that's, what we would probably consider typical compost. It's almost completely broken down. That again, there's still some room for it to break down. That encourages the worms and the roly-polies, everybody to come, to eat, to move, to something like what I call amendment. And when people say, well, what kind of organic matter? Am I putting big wood chips? Well, it takes a long time for big wood chips. And if you've put redwood chips or this, I ran out of baggies, but what we call gorilla mulch, you will have that forever before that ever, you will be gone before this is off and gone. It's great for slopes because it doesn't move. Or if you want the mulch for water retention, it's not great in any immediate future for degrading and improving the soil. I personally like something like this, and I would say a lot of this stuff is, I don't know, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. It's just a mix of different things. Oh, and a lot of people think if they add sand to their clay, they're going to break it up, but that actually makes more like a cement. So you really do want to stick to organic, not sand.
Can you say more about that? Because I have one of my neighbors who that's what his strategy, and he's been putting the clumps out for the recycle. Like buckets and buckets, he's digging through his whole front yard and putting the big clumps out
Of clay.
for the garbage. Yeah. Do you have any more
Well, okay.
ammunition for the argument?
Yes, I do actually. I've tried that. One of the problems is, let's say I've got a plant to put in the garden, and I dig a big hole and I take all the clay out and I put in all this, nice fluffy soil. The first rain, all that water is going to go in there like a bathtub because the clay around it, it's holding that water there. So that plant is going to drown. Second of all, healthy soil isn't always being turned over. That life, that whole little picture of, let's see, where was it? All these animals and all the things we can't see, they get all out of balance and disturbed. When we're digging in the soil, we're pulling out stuff, we're putting in other stuff. It's much better to let these guys develop. It's their home. It's like people don't like to live where there's maybe floods all the time or hurricanes all the time. I mean, we as humans don't want to stay somewhere with a lot of turmoil. All the healthy stuff doesn't want to live somewhere that there's a lot of turmoil. It's better to just let it will get pulled down. These animals, this universe will do its job. It's hard to believe. If he wants, first of all, roots for most plants are the first 8 to 10 inches, except for trees and eventually mature shrubs and everything. So digging 3 feet down and pulling out chunks of clay doesn't really do anything for anybody. Second of all, if he wants to really do something, he could scratch in the top 6 inches the first time around and then just lay it on top in the future. But basically, it's the whole bathtub issue. You can pull out clay here and there, but then you're just going to have pools of water, and it's just going to go to where it's easiest for it to accumulate. It's not going to be forced to spread out across the area. And clay has a lot of mineral nutrition. It's actually very rich. It's broken down and broken down, so that's why it's, it's the smallest particle, I guess. But it's actually got a lot of good things for plants. And getting rid of all the clay, full sand isn't great. People who have sand, they're not putting in clay, but they're also putting in organic matter. I mean, really, organic matter is just the answer to almost any soil question. Yes?
Can that be actually a good strategy, though, if you're planting like hydrangeas or roses that need a lot of water to kind of create almost like the little bathtub, so that if you have the other plants that you're not caring as much about, but they don't use much water in the garden, and you really want more water to go to those?
I would say you really want that root ball to develop. Now, things like camellias or even hydrangeas, their root balls are wider than deeper. But I would say they need to learn to live in the world they're in. So just making, if you really want to isolate them, put them in a container. As a container gardener, I think containers are great and they have a lot of wonderful uses, but I think certainly when you go to dig a hole, which should be at least twice as wide as, say, the container it came in, but not deeper. Generally, and it's also best if this is a little bit of a hill and you've made almost like a W. So you've got a little bit down here, a little bit down here. Add about 25% organic matter to the stuff that's coming back in. That's about the right amount so that as soon as it gets through all that amended bit and it hits your native soil, it still keeps going. It doesn't say, oh, I'm just going to stop here and I'm going to stunt my growth. The organic matter is also, yes, going to help with the water retention. I hear what you're saying, but I also would worry about root rot and crown rot. In fact, crown rot is one of the main reasons plants die when you've planted them, or maybe with all this rain you had a section that wasn't used to that much water in the last few years. This plant, or any of these plants, should be planted at the level it came, not deeper. Tomatoes are an exception. There might be one or two other things, but generally even a ½ inch or so above ground is better, because root rot's a bigger problem than that.
Laurel?
Yeah.
So that slide shows a lot of little fauna that are helpful to the soil.
Yes.
Are slugs ever helpful to the soil?
No. Well,
Because they seem to cut. I have so many thousands of them.
yes.
But they seem to come out of the soil. I can't believe they're living anywhere else.
Well, first of all, the snail that we all know and hate is apparently from France, a foreigner. We have a native snail. It's a tiny little thing. It's flat and circular. I don't know of any beneficial reasons for slugs other than they feed ducks and birds and chickens, and maybe if you want that relationship. But I find my rule is snails, slugs, and earwigs, it's okay to get rid of without really ruining the ecosystem. But yeah. I'm sure if we got rid of all the slugs in the world, there'd be a problem, but I'm not sure what that would be.
Well, just
Yeah.
a question, so more of a statement. So today we actually have mulch giveaway.
Oh.
You can go get. So anyone who's here, you can go get your bag, get your mulch, and get started.
Yeah, and I'm going to show you what not to do a little bit later on, because when I go to gardens, I see the do's and the don'ts. So this is more what I call amendment, where you want just 1 or 2 inches. We've talked about all this. One thing is, if you can, let the leaves that fall off the trees stay. Certainly for oaks, that's the best thing you can do. All the mow and not the mow, the blowing that goes on, and they take half the mulch with them. We go a lot of places where people are saying, well, I put out mulch, but the guy blew it all away. Well, that is not helping. So as much as you can live with a little bit of leaves on the ground, or if you really hate the leaves, maybe somebody can gently rake or use some other device so that you actually are keeping your mulch there. Okay, now of course this is in the extreme, but you really want 2 or 3 inches of mulch. And the role of mulch, if it breaks down, yes, it's going to help your soil, but it's also going to retain a lot of moisture. It's going to suppress weeds. It helps with the temperature. If we have a really hot day, it protects things. If we have really cold days, it works both ways. And normally you don't see, well, the mulch and then the grass. What I often see though is the mulch like that, you know, all the way up to the crown or the trunk. You want mulch to be away from the middle of the plant. And I don't have anything with a specific stem, but you know, even something like a little shrub, I might put, so we talked about not planting this deep. I might even plant it, you know, a little high, 1/2 inch or something. Depends on how big the root ball is. I would put the mulch to maybe about here. First of all, the roots eventually are coming out here. So it's still protecting, you know, the plant. But again, it's all about rot, and you're keeping moisture against the tree or the stem. It is not good for the plant. You don't need it 3 feet away, but even just, you know, for a tree, 6-12 inches, depends on how big the tree is really much better for it. So that's my mulch warning for the day. And if you see worms, you're good. And if you don't see worms, it's a couple of things. If you're adding a lot of organic matter, but you don't have any moisture, well, first of all, your organic matter's probably not decaying. And the worms tend to like a little bit of moisture. Right now, we should have worms. If you've got healthy soil with all the moisture we have, if you dig in, you should find worms. But they're really your friend. So just keep that in mind. Then, you know, you've got your dirt. Now you're ready to plant. And there's so many great plants that are drought tolerant, water wise. I personally think most plants can become, I don't want to say drought tolerant, but you can make a big improvement on all plants if you just treat them right, grow them right. So these are out, although these are all technically drought tolerant. This is a bleeding heart that's a native, which is really pretty, and it comes in pink. Even though it looks ferny and whatever, it's drought tolerant. It'll kind of come and go as there's water. And I've got some other plants at the end, but there are a lot of great plants out there also. The fact that we've had this drought has spurred a whole industry. Well, and we have climate change, and you know, we do have climate change, that is a fact. And so people are looking for things that will survive in the long term with less water. So so nurseries or horticulturalists are developing new varieties. They're bringing things from Australia. This is actually a Cicericium, the blue-eyed grass, which the California natives are little green leaves with little blue or yellow flowers. This to me looks like the Siberian iris, and it's got these flowers coming out. This is an Argentinian version. But again, I think that's beautiful, whether it had flowers or not, just to be in the garden. And that's a new variety I'd never seen before, but they're bringing those things here to the market. One thing to keep in mind is by the time you go to the nursery, that plant has already been grown, put in a plastic container, watered, fertilized, and driven to your nursery. So personally, I think it's important to pick the right plants, you know, the first time. And people are doing all that. So, you know, you've got somebody who drove to work to then water the plants to then drive home. There's a big impact just in one plant. This is a choicea. This is in the family of the mock orange called Aztec Pearl, which is a favorite of mine this year. I always have new obsessions every year. But a lot of us have the standard mock orange, Choicea tornata, which grows like crazy. And that's just a smaller, different, more delicate version. So obviously a key rule of sustainability, right plant in the right place, and it isn't always a drought tolerant plant. Some of us, I live on a slope in San Mateo up by 280 and 92, at the bottom of my front yard, the way the drainage is, it's wet all the time. So a drought tolerant plant isn't the right plant for that place. You need to know what your situation is. You also want to consider sun, wind. Frost is something I think we forget around here, but we always get a few frost days, and frost goes down. So against the house, this is not my house, but if you could imagine, I live with a hill in the back, and then in the front is where it's really wet. Every year I put stuff against the house thinking I'm going to protect it under the eaves, and every year I get frost damage. You would think I would learn that lesson, but someday. So those are just things to think about, not just what it's like today, but all year round, and where the water runs. Everyone should probably know this year where the water pooled or where it didn't pool, and everything. The other thing to consider is your actual little microclimate. This is from some master gardeners. I think it's on their website, the Marin Master Gardeners. And it's just a nice little example of how even a rock wall can bring extra heat on the sunny side. It can provide shade, which means more moisture in the soil on the other side, wind, etc. Those things can affect what you want to grow. I live near the fog belt, so I can't grow a lot of tomatoes. But if I put them against my house, which is, reflects the sun, and then it's next to my neighbor's driveway, I get all that residual heat from the concrete, and I actually can get a few tomatoes every year. You want to, when you're thinking about the whole garden, it's better to have a variety of plants. One, that's going to encourage different, say, beneficial insects. Two, if you get a disease on one, it usually doesn't go to another type of plant. In fact, boxwood, which I know there's a lot of boxwood, there's a blight. And in England, it's really killed the boxwood there. That's really damaged the industry, and they're trying to find tolerant ones. Apparently it's come to California, and it just sort of turns brown and your leaves die. I should have had a picture. But if you've got just a lot of boxwood, well, that's just sending it right down your property. You should put plants together that have the same needs. So if you've got something that's high water and something that really hates water, you wouldn't put a hydrangea and a succulent maybe together. They just don't have the same needs. I think you should put a few things in the garden that you really love, because it will make you care about the garden and what's going on in the garden. So if what you love is, even roses can become fairly drought tolerant, but something that needs a lot of water, just plant a couple, not a whole yard of them. Or if you really like colorful annuals, which can take a lot of water, use a couple of pots in key places full of petunias or impatiens or whatever it is you love. It just will encourage you to get out there and be aware. However, you do have to be realistic. Beefsteak tomatoes, there are a lot of them that to do well need humidity at night. We're lucky we don't have that, so you're never going to have, unless you want to do a greenhouse with humidity and heat it at night. And then that's a lot of resources that probably aren't sustainable. There are some plants that need colder winters than we have. So, although I think you should plant what you love, sometimes you also have to realize what's just not going to happen. And, I know a lot of people think sustainable is maybe this, but it can be, something like that. Or this is a designer actually from Los Altos, Rebecca Sweet, who has a website. That's Australia, but it can have a lush feeling. You can also do formal drought tolerance. Some people really like the neat, the clean, the clipped, you can get some pretty formal, traditional looking, drought tolerant plant. Oops. So this is my big thing. If you're going to use water, I think you should use it right. Well, soil's the big thing in mine, but this is my other big thing. We all know we're supposed to reduce water. And maybe you heard about water budgets, or oh, you should use drip. Well, all of those things don't matter if you're really not applying it correctly or doing it in a way that helps. One, you may quit. Two, your plants may die. Then you're back at the nursery buying more, or you're paving it over with a great big patio and the water's, running off. So it's important to use the water correctly. There are a couple of things, well, I've got these here really for me more than you, but first of all, the roots of plants, especially trees, go much farther. We always learned the drip line was where the roots went. Well, for trees, this is an apple tree, they go much farther. And a lot of trees suffered over the last few years because they were getting lawn water and they never bothered to develop deep roots to look for the water. So when people quit watering their lawns, those trees didn't have anywhere to get water, and so many were lost. It's hard to get an arborist. If you've tried, I've tried sometimes, you can have a difficult time because they're so busy. Roots can get really deep, and drought-tolerant plants want to get deep roots, but you still have to train it. It's only going to go where the water is going to go. So think of training your plants much like you train a pet or something when you first get it. Also, the roots are not next to the trunk. And even drought-tolerant plants need 2 summers of water added to them. The first summer that you plant them, they need regular water. The second summer, it's reduced. By the 3rd summer, it might need to be monthly. And then with a true native or super drought tolerant plant, in theory, it doesn't need any more additional water. I think if you have healthy soil and you mulch, you might get away with that, but you'll have to be your own judge. The other thing is, if you're using water, make sure you keep it on the property. We all know our sprinklers shouldn't water the sidewalk or the driveway, but if you've got a slope, sometimes it's efficient to make like a little, what they call a boomerang, or a bit of a swale to capture that water, or capture the water from rain when it comes, rather than letting it just run off. If you change the topography just a little bit in your area, you're keeping that water that you're getting, into the ground, and that's not quite in the bank for the later months, but it's certainly helping with that. I wish I could come up with a great acronym or whatever to get people to think, but basically that's all I could come up with. And I've been thinking about this for years. But you want to give plants sips of a lot of water for a long time and then let it wait. And then give it another sip, so that with our clay, even with all the organic amendment, if they, just like when you try to take a big gulp of water or coffee and it all comes down your shirt, well, that's what happens with the dirt. It just doesn't all go in and down, it just goes everywhere. So if you can kind of imagine a daisy with a glass and a straw, that's sort of the right idea. And so we like drip a lot because that allows you to manage that. You can also, there are sprinkler heads that aren't so misty, that are actually slightly bigger drops, that you can also run sprinkler irrigation. In those cases, if you tend to have a lot of runoff after 5 minutes, it might need to go on, go off for an hour or 2, come back on, and you might do that once a week or twice a week, depending on your needs. This to me is the most egregious thing. I walk around people's yards, I don't even know, and I move their drip irrigation. You'll have a lot of installations where they think, one, you only really need one emitter, and two, that it should be right at the trunk. As I've said a few times, that encourages rot. Two, it doesn't encourage the roots to go anywhere, but right, maybe straight down, but right there. Whereas you'd like them to be broader than that. Three, sometimes I've seen plants grow over this, where you've, a mature hydrangea or whatever, and all of a sudden roots have wrapped around it, and maybe it's kinked, and you can't even get it out of there anymore, and you don't know you don't have water anymore. It also should be, water should be around. The one emitter on one side, that water doesn't come to the other side. Water will go horizontally to a degree, but your plant will either travel if it can, or it won't have balanced growth, or it may suffer. You really won't water, you don't need 6 emitters, but I would say even 2 emitters are important. When you're first starting out, if I've just planted this and I'm going to put an emitter for the first, I don't know, couple, maybe year, I might put them, here. First of all, not what I'll see is them, stuck underneath. So I'm going to put them maybe just right at the verge of their drip line, and then move them as they get older. Move them out some, to some point. I mean, with the shrub, you're not moving it out 6 feet, but you have to you have to judge. The other thing about water is people plant succulents, or they plant ceanothus or whatever. It's drought tolerant. It doesn't need water. That is not true. Even succulents need water. In fact, some succulents need some regular water, whatever that means, or they can't handle the hot sun all day. So it's educating yourself a little bit about the plants, but everything does need water. Fake plants, rocks, they don't need water, or artificial turf, which is another topic, but everything else does need some water. And if you're interested in doing this yourself, or you have somebody who helps you and you want to send them to learn more, Urban Farmer is the best resource in the Bay Area. They're in San Francisco, they're in Richmond, they're not on the peninsula. I think they're in the East Bay too. In Marin. They will help you figure out anything, and they know about all the rebates, if they're still in effect, or the WaterWise heads. There used to be a deal. Yes?
We actually have the water table today, and they have rebates for smart emitters, I guess.
Okay,
As
yeah.
well as your timers. So go check it out. The water table's just down the way.
And who's
The Bear Gulch. Bear Gulch.
Bear Gulch? Okay, great. So yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of other great resources. I happen to like these guys because you can walk in and really know nothing, and they don't make you feel stupid. They also have a huge website with lots of articles, and they do classes on drip irrigation. So for homeowners or individuals, and for professionals who want to learn more. So I always give them a big shout out. So if we're going to talk about sustainable gardening, this isn't so much about WaterWise as sustainable. Organic, I think if you're going to use fertilizer, which you may not need to if you're adding organic matter, because that is like eating healthy food, and fertilizers are maybe like a vitamin. I guess if I could have an analogy. But if you need fertilizer, do organic. It's slower. It's usually got more things in it that are going to help the soil as well as the plant. It's not just going to have the 3 main nutrients. And you don't want that big burst of super growth that you can get from some of the inorganic fertilizers for a couple of reasons. One, the plant isn't growing in a careful, healthy way. So you might get growth that it's too weak to support in the long term. It also encourages things like aphids when you have all that new tender growth. In fact, we have a lot of aphids this year because we had so much rain and there's a lot of new tender growth. It's just really better, and there's some great organic fertilizers at all price points. Acid-loving plants, our clay soil is basically alkaline for the most part. There may be some areas where you get some acidic, but if you're growing hydrangeas, camellias, whatever, you may need to address that because pH, acid and alkaline is the pH of the soil. If a plant is acid-loving, but it's in an alkaline soil, it can't draw the nutrients from the soil. There's just something about that pH level that prevents it. So there are too many acid-loving things we need to deal with, but camellias are popular, azaleas, blueberries, rhododendrons. There's a list, it's easy to find. Those may need something. This is my big bugaboo about try to avoid gas-powered tools. Not only, especially the blowers. First of all, because I think they blow away the mulch and some of the things that are good. Yesterday, my colleague and I were in Menlo Park doing some containers. This is a long court. There's a court behind me. A guy walked with the blower in and out of every house here, and it's not big enough. There's a tiny pile of leaves there that eventually then he came back to rake. If he had had a broom or a hand brush and a bag, he could have done all of that, probably faster. He was really slow. The gas was everywhere. It's really not necessary. And it's not, I don't see the benefit on any level.
But it takes them longer and they won't do it. We should have a city ordinance where we don't allow that.
Well, and that's something, yes, to discuss with your government officials. I will say in defense of the gardeners, a lot of people only want to pay a certain amount of money for their yard maintenance. And they have to get so many jobs, they get paid by the job. So they're losing money if it takes them longer. And I don't know what the balance is, I'm not involved with that. But people might also have to pay more to get the right kind of services. Just like, maybe organic produce sometimes costs more. It might be that sustainable garden practices might cost more until that becomes a norm where it evens out. But yeah, it's important to weed. Sustainable gardening, your weeds are gonna rob you of nutrition, water, etc. Be careful with herbicides, even things like vinegar, they can kill things. So I'm not saying don't use herbicides. There are things that you have to use Roundup for. But if you've got to use it, you cut the thing down, you just take a little bit and you put it right on the open ends of the plant so it sucks it in. So you're really using the smallest amount possible. It's better to either hand pull, or you can do sheet mulching or some other thing that actually just, in our yard, we had a bunch of oxalis. We threw down a bunch of cardboard, put mulch on top of it, got 99% of it, so there are a lot of easy things to do that don't involve chemicals. And I did actually read a story about somebody using vinegar to kill weeds and accidentally sprayed a frog, and it killed the frog. It just got in its way. So we think, these things are safe, and yeah, they are safe, but everything has a reaction or a consequence. So even the healthiest things get sick. The best thing to do is, first of all, figure out what it is, you can ask a master gardener. Or you can go to a lot of the independent nurseries up and down the peninsula have some really good people who are very knowledgeable. Wegmans is one of your closest, and that's a family-run business. There's a couple people there that are very smart. I think it's best to use non-chemical options first for aphids, which we'll have a lot of. I wear rubber gloves usually, but I just wipe them off a little bit first of all. That seems to work good enough. You can supposedly wash them off with a hose, but I find by the time I've sprayed the hose hard enough, I've like knocked the head off the rosebud I was trying to wipe the aphids off of or cause more damage. There are a lot of organic treatments. Neem oil is great, but even when you spray the neem oil, if it covers a beneficial insect, it's gonna kill that insect. Now, the residue of neem oil only affects bugs that eat plants, so in that way it's a good product. It is an organic product, but you wanna attract beneficials to your yard to really have them take care of the job for you. And the only way you're gonna do that is if there's something there for them to eat. You want them to come eat your aphids, but you don't allow one aphid in your yard, then the ladybug who's thinking about where to lay her eggs and to come home, make a home, she's gonna find somewhere else. So sometimes you have to give a little to get a lot. And I don't know if anyone knows the answer to this, but this is all about education and again, beneficial insects. The answer to this is actually neither one of those is bad. It's a trick question. This is a ladybug larva, which most people think ladybugs eat all of the aphids. It's their larva. So you would never know that. And this is a soldier beetle. And the first time I saw one of those, I thought it was bad. So I was chasing it off my plants because, well, it was ugly to me. So if it was ugly, it had to be bad. And the fact of the matter is, those guys eat a lot of aphids. In fact, in my yard, I find these guys way more than I find ladybug larvae. When you start to see a lot of ladybug larvae, you probably have also seen a lot of aphids, I think, to get the quantity. So it's important to sort of know what you've got out there. And again, I think we have cards out there, but this is our website. There's a whole there's a whole section on the left-hand side with garden resources. There's advice on just about anything. And then a way to contact us if you have more questions. These are other resources. I'm a big advocate of the public library. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with Atherton's library, but I think they're all connected and you can get books from anywhere, and the library system's made a big effort, I think, to stay up to date on some great things, including that rainwater harvesting book that I mentioned by Brad Lancaster. And then I have a whole list, not a whole list, I've got like 10 pictures of plants just because people always want to know about drought-tolerant plants. This is an Escallonia that actually blooms almost like a little white crepe myrtle, and it can be trimmed and neat. I'm a big fan of heuchera. There are a couple here are coral bells. They have flowers, plus they come in every color. This is a Verbena de la Mina. I think this is a native, and you can cut that back and it'll grow again. It blooms almost year round. I will admit I don't love all Nandinas, but this lemon lime is a really nice, kind of lush with the very springy, fresh foliage. And they've got new Nandinas, I think, every season. So you almost could find one that will suit you. I like Agapanthus. I know some people don't, but I also really like the ones that have all the different colored foliage, because again, when there's no flowers, you still have something really interesting. Catmint. This is a white catmint, so I brought that too. It's a great ground cover. it blooms, you cut it back, it blooms again, but they're in blue when they get from, I think, 3 feet tall to 6 inches tall. Let's see. This is what we call Australian fuchsia. This is a great drought tolerant plant. It comes out and has these little fuchsia-like bells. Hellebores, this is a winter blooming thing. Very drought tolerant, you need to do nothing, and there are some very, very pretty choices, plus they bloom in the winter, so it's nice to get something then. I guess that was the end of all the ones I had here, and then the third plant I brought that's very drought tolerant, it's called Caprosma or mirror plant. It also comes in every color of the rainbow. Some I personally think are gaudy, but I've also seen the right combinations with the right plants be beautiful. And again, you're getting something beautiful all year round, low water, easy, not a lot of pest problems. So it's easy to maintain. I think I don't have a graceful exit to this discussion, but I hope that's given you some ideas of how to be more drought tolerant and sustainable. And once you start working on all those areas, it really gets going and it gets easier, and you really reap the benefits. So thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yes.
Vegetable garden.
Yeah.
Is it best to water, deeply in the morning, or should I water not so much in the morning and water again in the afternoon?
No, it's better to water in the morning, really. Water on some leaves can sometimes cause a little bit of damage. Also, it allows the plant to dry out during the day. And it's also better if you can do it at the ground. Do you do overhead watering or?
It's good.
Yeah, it's better in the morning. I know sometimes you see them at the end of the day and you think they need a spray, but yeah. Okay, yes.
I have a question. I live on a completely flat parcel.
Yeah.
So I have the opposite. It's like can become like the bog of clay. So how do you, beyond mulch, is there anything else you would suggest?
Yes, berms. I would build some different areas for you, and that's what people do sometimes. So maybe at the edge of your property near the street or the driveway, you can do them L-shaped or whatever. So that's actually gonna, you're welcome, give you some extra area for good soil. You could, now when you say it's a bog, is that because everybody's water runs down to your?
It can be like this year, for example, because there's so much rain. It's not typical,
Right.
in my experience, but this year it's like, okay, I can see where all the clay is, and I've added a whole bunch of topsoil
Right.
and mulch, but there's only so much you can do. So
Right. You may, if you're getting water also from other properties, need to think about drainage and diverting it. I know I said keep all the water you get, but sometimes it can be too much of a good thing. So you definitely want to, you might need to divert that water off. In your situation, I would have probably, if you had sort of a blank slate, I probably would have rototilled in the top 8 to 10 inches organic matter.
I did that when we restarted our gardens.
Okay, so you already sort of have at least better drainage, but you're still getting all this.
Well, just parts of it. It's not as bad as it used to be.
Okay, so if you do, this isn't really a great example, but, these berms, let's say the water is coming, down somehow. If you have hills, you could maybe divert it from coming into where it might normally accumulate. I don't know, I'm trying to think of,
Just about moving it around.
it is about moving it around, yeah, so.
Do you have any suggestions as to how to keep squirrels from eating your vegetables?
Okay, well, my tricks are probably not Master Gardener sanctioned.
I don't care.
Okay. So I use well, we're talking vegetables, right? So they're sort of chest level and below. We're not talking trees.
No, it's
Yeah, yeah.
mainly the vegetables.
Right.
I mean, I had no tomatoes last year. I had no anything.
Okay.
They eat everything.
They do. So what I do is use my tomato cage, or I get some bamboo sticks or whatever. You could do the bird netting. I find that a little hard to manage. I used, you know, that netting like you could almost buy at Joann's, that sheer netting that they used to make, like that, or a row cover fabric. There are all kinds of things. I have thrown that over. It lets the light through in the air and the water. The only problem with that, and then I make sure it's either, you know, got rocks at the bottom so it's down, you know, you have to block the entrance. The thing is, you need pollinators in there to pollinate, so you have to take it off. The bird fabric, we did use that last year, and so I had my tomatoes in an area, and I was having the same problem. We put stakes in the ground, and then we just used clips, or I don't know what we used, duct tape. Took that bird netting and just rolled it all the way around from the bottom. You know, it's a roll, so we just unrolled it all the way around. That, as long as you could keep it on the ground, so I had to use a few rocks to just keep it anchored. That generally works. We didn't have an area where they could climb and jump down, because when they start to climb on that netting, it's soft and so they can't really climb on that too well. That worked okay. It was just, you know, I had to kind of reach over to get in.
Oh, I have one of those cages over at Tomatoes that, you know, you unzip and get.
Oh
inside.
goodness, so you really have a.
But they literally ripped to get inside.
The squirrels did?
The squirrel. I mean.
Oh, okay then. Well, there is what's called hard cloth. You know, it looks like it's chicken wire, but that would be really painful to deal with.
Well,
I tried to tangle it.
Well, that's sticky stuff.
Yeah, that was from my peach, because the little thieves took them all.
Oh, yeah, I do that.
Yeah.
All my fruit.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Not an apple left. I
Interesting.
had nothing left.
We have we don't have enough predators for the squirrels here. We have we joke that they're Atherton rats.
I'm wondering. Okay. Well.
And I'm wondering if it was because it was so dry that they were thirsty last year. So I'm hoping there won't be so many this year.
I will say. Let me just. But I have a. Cats. Outdoor cats are good predators. I don't know, I don't know the ratio for cat to squirrel, but since they are predators, that might be an option. I know you don't want to, we got cats because we had gophers, and then the cat brought in a little snake, and that was the end of the outdoor cat experience. So, but I would say cats, or, owls. There are certain owls that are predators, and it's not always the owl we think of, but there are some programs that will. I don't know if the city.
I know, and the crows scare them away.
Yeah, I hear about, you can buy fox urine or whatever. They get used to all of that stuff. There are those.
I tried hot pepper spray.
Tanglefoot, they left the tail behind for us.
Oh, I did hear somebody who cut, I just read this in Fine Gardening or something. They cut up little pieces of netting or whatever, and as the fruit was ripening, they actually tied little
around
bags around, the fruit, or the stem to the fruit. So at least.
Oh, that's a great idea. Okay, I'm gonna try that this year.
I'm really sorry. I know there's nothing more maddening than, the other thing I did read was those sprinklers, movement censored sprinklers.
They get sprayed.
but the key was to not have it hit your plant.
Yeah.
So you have to have it set for the area just outside your plant. You know, as soon as they enter the perimeter,
Right.
if you spray them, I did read that worked. So
The next step is a squirrel trap, I'm sorry.
Her, my family.
no, you know what? They're not. It's not a balance. So
No. I mean, if they take one,
Yeah,
no. But do they bite? I have the problem where they bite something and then they
they
drop
leave
it.
it behind.
yes, and they take it to my furniture that I've just cleaned.